Hi, my name is Justin, aka Ghost Reader, and today we're going to talk about the graphic novel Mouse, which is written by Art Spiegelman. I have here the two-volume version of it, but you can actually get it as a collected volume from a bookstore, comic book store, Amazon. It's been pretty popular recently because of the news out of Tennessee. A McMinn school board, or McMinn County School Board, decided that they were going to strike it from the curriculum as a teaching tool for the Holocaust for their eighth graders. And they released a statement they released the following statement saying why. One of the most important roles of an elected Board of Education is to reflect the values of the community it serves. The McMinn County Board of Education voted to remove the graphic novel Mouse from McMinn County schools because of its unnecessary use of profanity and nudity and its depiction of violence and suicide. Taken as a whole, the board felt this work was simply too adult oriented for use in our schools. We do not diminish the value of Maus as a impactful and meaningful piece of literature, nor do we dispute the importance of teaching our children the historical and moral lessons and reality of the Holocaust. To the contrary, we have asked our administrators to find other works that accomplish the same educational goals in a more age appropriate fashion. The atrocities of the Holocaust were shameful beyond description, and we all have an obligation to ensure that the younger generations learn of its horrors to ensure that such an event is never repeated. We simply do not believe that this work is an appropriate text for our students to study. Now, this is nothing new. There have been a number of school boards in the past year that have banned certain books for many different reasons. But one thing that kind of caught my eye on this one is I was reading this article from the CNBC, and one of the board members was reported as saying, being in the schools, educators and stuff, we don't need to enable or somewhat promote this stuff. It shows people hanging, it shows them killing kids. Why does the educational system promote this kind of stuff? It is not wise or healthy, Altman said, according to the minutes. So basically, this one board member actually said that, hey, like this material in this book actually promotes this stuff, like, such as suicide, the violence, and the profanity that is shown in the book. Also, there was some pushback, I will say, even though the board voted 10-0 for striking it from the curriculum, there were some people who did speak back and say like, hey, maybe there is some things, there's some merit to keeping this book in. For example, according to the CNBC, Julie Gooden, assistant principal, replied to Altman saying, I can talk of the history. I was a history teacher. There's nothing pretty about the Holocaust. And for me, this is a great way to depict a horrific time in history. Mr. Spiegelman did his best to depict his mother passing away, and we're almost 80 years away. It's hard for this generation. These kids don't even know 9/11. They weren't even born. And also from the Tennessean, there reported another person who stood up and said, institutional supervisor Melishawn Knight pointed out that she taught several books with vulgar language and violence as a teacher, including The Bridge to Terabithia, The Whipping Boy, and To Kill a Mockingbird. Having read the book myself, I think that the book actually quite shows the opposite. It doesn't glorify any of the violence, it doesn't glorify the suicide or any of the other stuff which the board mentions may be harmful to their children. In fact, I think it does quite the opposite in terms of the violence and in terms of suicide. For one, the violence is actually part of the historical context in which the story is taking place in. And for those of you who don't know, basically, Mouse is a graphic novel in which the author basically is relating to the reader what his father told him about the Holocaust. He's actually interviewing his father throughout the book, every time he visits him throughout the book to learn what his story was like a little before, how he met his mother, how they made it through the Holocaust, and how they came to live in the United States in the present time. And not only that, but it also deals with talks about his mother's suicide and what that meant for a relationship between him and his father. So as much as this story is a story about the Holocaust, it's also a story about a son trying to come to terms with his relationship with his father, come to terms with his feelings about his mother's suicide, and also what does it mean to be a good son in terms of dealing with his father? Because his father is not someone who is easy to deal with. So I think that the book tackles very complicated issues in a very good way, and I think one of the best ways in which it does that is that it stays real. It doesn't try to color the reality of things. He could have made his father to be like this unblemished hero that made it through the Holocaust, and look how great my dad is. Instead, he gave a true portrayal of his dad, and like most people, his dad was complicated. on the one hand, like he was very resourceful, very quick-minded, and very intelligent, and that was what got him through the Holocaust and was able to help his mother when they were both at Auschwitz. But on the other hand, you can see that, like all humans, he has some shortcomings. For example, there is a part in the book where the his father, the author's father, the author and the author's wife are in a car coming back from a store, and the author's wife pulls over to pick up a hitchhiker who happens to be black. The once the hitchhiker leaves, and please don't pick up hitchhikers, but the author's father's was kind of mad about the fact that she had let a black man into their car because black men steal stuff or black people steal stuff, and his wife, the author's wife, pointed out the hypocrisy of being like, hey, you just went through all that in the Holocaust, but yet like you still have like these same ideas that the Germans had, but towards blacks, and so he could have left that out. The author didn't have to add that in. He could have just shown his dad as this hero, as his hero who made it through the Holocaust, but instead he gave a very real version of that, and that's how he also tackles the Holocaust. So yes, there are scenes of violence, but in no way, shape, or form would a child who is right mentally is going to walk away and be like, hey, you know what? I think that this is something that I should be doing, or something that we as a society should do. And yes, there's profanity. There is like some nudity in it because he depicts his mother's suicide in the book, and that depiction is him. He actually himself had drawn a comic at some point in his life where he was trying to deal with his feelings about his mother's suicide. So it does deal with some heavy topics, but I think there are topics that, especially in today's world with social media and in the world where basically everyone has a cell phone, where we can be just like this, exposed to everything out there. I think that this book had the chance in the classroom to start some conversations among students about things like the Holocaust, how we treat others, suicide, and its impact on other people. So unfortunately, the McMinn County School Board struck this book from the curriculum, but it does seem that other people are now buying the book, and probably who have never heard about it before, perhaps, and now picking it up for the first time. For example, on Amazon, it became a bestseller, and also Nirvana Comics Knoxville actually started a GoFundMe to build up funds in order to get copies to kids around the country, not just locally, but also around the country. And they had a goal of, I believe, 20,000. Well, they're now over $70,000. So people are willing to give. They're willing to give money to give people a chance to read this book, because I read it myself. I read it twice. I read it just before this video just to kind of refresh myself on it. And I think it'd be, for that age range, just going into high school age, I think it's a really good book. I think that this book has a better chance of getting to the kids this age than like another book, like say Night, for example, which is just a book with, they may just be like, oh, it's just a book with a whole bunch of words, I don't want to read it. Mouse gives it, I think, a much better chance of getting to the students because it is in graphic novel form. It may be a more interesting, at least like may grab their eye a bit better than like just a plain book. So that's gonna be it for this video. What do you guys think? Do you think that they were right in banning Mouse? Say down in the comment section below. If you read the book, let me know your thoughts on it. And would you give it to your kids if you had kids, or if you have kids now? What age would you give it to them in order to perhaps talk about the Holocaust? So that's going to be it for this video. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more videos from me, please subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at GhostReads28, on Instagram at Justin the Ghost Reader, and on Goodreads. The link to that is down in the description box below. So as always, keep reading, and Black Lives Matter.